Coming to you from the Star City, this is Scarlet Fever, a daily Nebraskan production.
Let the record show that 60 degrees on a Sunday in December is downright insane. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Welcome back to Scarlet Fever Monday, and it's a busy day. We got a lot going on. Danny and Emma here to start out for today. First of all, there's so much going on. It feels like my head's spinning. I still subject myself to the disappointment that is NFL every week. And which is why I really feel so depressed today.
My team won, so.
All right, I don't want to. Your team sucks, okay? They're the worst 11-1 team I've ever seen in my life.
We'll see when they win the Super Bowl.
If they've won 9 one-score games. If they hadn't won any of those one-score games, they'd be the worst team in the AFC.
But they won them, so it doesn't really matter.
I don't care. I'll continue to be a nihilist and continue to hate everything because that's all I do. But anyway, we have things to get to. There's a lot going on. There's some dancing going on with this Nebraska volleyball team. So much happened over the first weekend. Before we go to Nebraska, for sure, to start with, let's take a look at just the field itself because it actually is a very intriguing Final 16. There was a good amount of chalk when it came to some of the higher tier teams, save for SMU getting upset by Missouri in 4 sets, which looked like it was going to be a sweep for a while. But all the top seeds advanced, all the number 2 seeds advanced except for SMU, and a lot of lower seeded teams made it in as well. Notably, Florida got in, Marquette got in, Texas A&M got in, Dayton got in there as well. A lot of movement there in the Lincoln Regional with A&M and Dayton both knocking off Arizona State and Baylor, who were the higher seeded teams.
Yeah, really interesting as it's starting to go through. And that's kind of what I like about tournament play is those lower seed teams always kind of find a way in, and teams that you just don't expect to get in there.
The interesting thing, too, is that, in college volleyball especially, in the past it's been very top seed heavy.
Very kind of set in stone.
Yeah, not to use the phrase again, but it's always been very chalky. So we see a lot of 1-2s, 1-3s in the second weekend, but that's not really the case this year, at least when it comes to the lower seeded teams, because so many of them were able to advance.
And I think that's I think that'll draw more people in because it's exciting when you don't know who's going to win and when there's kind of more that element of surprise as opposed to going into a game and just being like, well, it's a win for them.
Exactly. So let's go into some of these matchups. We'll just go through them and then we'll talk about them a little bit. So we have Mizzou and Kentucky. That's a 7-3. Oregon Pitt, Florida Stanford, Purdue and Louisville. That's on Thursday. And then on Friday we have Texas and Creighton, Marquette and Penn State, A&M Wisconsin, Dayton, Nebraska. So these are all going to be some pretty fun matchups.
Yeah.
And you can't say Dayton, Nebraska. What's one matchup to you that's really, of these non-Nebraska games, these 7 other games, which other game is really wow, that one's going to be must-see TV?
I'm excited for Texas Creighton. And I know that's still a Nebraska team, but Creighton's...
No, that's acceptable.
Yeah, Creighton's number 2 and Texas is 3. But Texas, when it comes to tournament play, always kind of they're sneaky. They haven't been great this season compared to last season, I would say. But Creighton's been really good. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting matchup to me. I'm excited for it.
I think this is probably going to be one of the most slept-on games of the second weekend. And funny how you brought up how Texas really hasn't been playing their best ball. They always start to ramp it up. In mid-November and December, they're one of the hardest teams to play. Doesn't matter where they are. This is just kind of how it's been over the last 2-3 seasons. If Texas gets into the dance, look out because here they come.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this team so intriguing, especially when you're bringing back so many players from last year's team and even 2 years ago when they won the title. You've brought in a bunch of new talent as well, and that was kind of the issue that Texas had earlier in the season is that they're just trying to make everybody happy. They, for whatever reason, were running a 6-2 and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So they have to go revert back to 5-1, feed the ball to Maddie Skinner all the time. And wow, look at that. What a newfound concept. Feed the ball to your best player. Who'd have thought of that one?
And Ella Swindle's been having a couple good games too lately. So
Paige Vanderford's been having some pretty good games
Yeah.
as well. And I was a little surprised that USC kind of laid down at the foot of the Longhorns in the second round game. I was expecting a little bit more out of Allie Batenhorst and the Trojans there.
That made me really sad. It made me sad. I'm a big Allie Batenhorst fan.
Who isn't in Nebraska?
I know. So,
but this game it's gonna set up a lot because this is in the Penn State quadrant. Penn State's gonna get Marquette, and Utah was on the ropes against Marquette. I was watching that. I was one of those few people who actually sat and watched the fifth set from start to finish. But anyway, Marquette had Utah on the ropes. Utah started to fight back a little bit. They lost some gas. I think Penn State should handle Marquette pretty easily.
yeah.
But when we get to that Elite Eight, whether it's Texas or Creighton that Penn State has to go up against, that might be one of their toughest games that they play all year.
Yeah, I think Texas and Creighton are both really good teams, and I think they'll give Penn State a good run for their money, especially knowing that they're so close to what they really want.
But here's where I'm setting the bill at right now. I do think that Texas is going to beat Creighton because Creighton has not played a lot of top-tier teams this year. They have 0 top 25 wins.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to hurt them. Being able to knock off Ole Miss in the way they did, especially with how high they were flying after beating Florida State, was a pretty big win for them. But this Texas beast is just going to be very tough to tame.
Yeah, especially in that tournament play.
So that's definitely going to be a game to watch out for. That's going to be on Friday. Starts at 12 p.m., so middle of the day. So that'll be something to round out your work day on that Friday. By the way, it's December 9th on a Monday. We're recording today. Well, let's get to this Nebraska quadrant because this is obviously the one that you guys care about the most. And that is A&M Wisconsin, Nebraska Dayton. And Dayton and A&M really playing home court spoiler here. Dayton and Baylor was a really good game, and it never really seemed like Baylor got clicking on their home court. For Arizona State, I think was more shocking because this had been one of the most underrated teams. Yes, yet they were still ranked, but still one of the more underrated teams in the country. And A&M just kind of exposed them, winning the game 3-1. And, I mean, it never really seems like that Arizona State could get clicking.
Yeah, no. It didn't even go to 5. Like, it wasn't. They just took them in 4.
Yeah, the set score on this one was 25-19, 25-22. That was the one set ASU won. 25-15, 25-22. Like,
Yeah.
A&M just
Some
had
of those
the number
aren't
on
even
it.
close sets.
No.
Like, yeah.
In retrospect, they really aren't. So I think that A&M is going to give Wisconsin a run for their money. But I really, really believe it that we are going to have a Part 3 Nebraska-Wisconsin on Sunday for the entire country to get to watch on ABC.
Yeah, it's what all Nebraska fans are dreading. But
Well,
everybody else wants to
Nebraska
see.
fans are also dreading Creighton losing to Texas, which is why a lot of Nebraska fans are going to be throwing the blue on Friday, which is a very unforeseen thought. A lot of people are going to get upset at that, but it is going to happen.
Still a Nebraska team.
And on top of that, Nebraska fans are going to have to support Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Man, really getting thrown the devil's hammer here this week.
No good options.
No good options. But let's go back to Nebraska's first weekend. We haven't even gotten to that yet. Sweeps over Florida A&M and Miami.
Yeah, big sweeps.
Big sweeps. Let's talk about the first round game first. This was a get-right game for Nebraska. 25-3, 25-9 the first two sets. Absolutely unheard of. It will not happen again the rest of the season.
No.
The talent gap between the Rattlers and the Huskers just far and away are not even on the same page. And I think that for Nebraska in that game, it was okay, we can't let our heads get too big. We can't be sitting here thinking this is the SMU game. This was before we realized SMU was a good team. Can't be sitting here and thinking like, oh, they're going to come in and walk all over us.
Yeah.
Which never really felt like that was going to happen. But they couldn't have that mindset going on.
Yeah, no, I feel like they have to go into that game just ready to fight and ready to play whatever team is going to show up. And they came out there and dominated. So they definitely have that win mindset.
The good thing, too, is that they were able to get some of the bench mob in, particularly Layla Blackwell. Lindsey Krause got in for a little while.
Yeah.
So they're at least getting some of the dust knocked off, especially for Blackwell, who hasn't – of all the things I love about John Cook, that's the one thing that haven't really been super happy with, is that Blackwell hasn't gotten a lot of playing time.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you have 3 standout middle blockers. And then the second game, when they played Miami, this was really one where if there was going to be a high-stakes upset, I thought this would be the game for it. Flor Marie, Heredia Colon, and Grace Lopez
had nights.
They both had really good nights. And with their track records coming in and how Nebraska has a hard time handling multiple standout outsides on the same team, made me wonder, like, okay, what's this going to look like? And then I looked and saw their heights, and I saw 6'1" and 6'0".
Yeah, and Nebraska's defense really showed up. They had 20 blocks. Like
that's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a really big night for them. So
huge night on the blocking department, and we got to see some more of the backline fanatics. I knew that that was going to be one of my keys going into Saturday's game, was how was the back line going to be able to stack up against these hitters? Because if they were going to be able to get it over the block, however Ariana Rodriguez, who's the setter for Miami, is able to distribute it, what's that going to look like? And they did a pretty good job. I got to admit, they did good.
Yeah. I was really impressed with Harper Murray. She had 27 receptions. I felt like she did a really good job, like, digging the ball out. So.
And it's been slowly getting better as the years going on.
Yeah, it's been impressive. It's been fun to watch.
Another thing that they've done pretty well, too, is defending the back row attack. We haven't seen a ton of teams trying to attempt it on Nebraska, but Miami did, and it especially came with Heredia Colon. We saw Ava Carney do it a couple times as well, but with how much they were coming out of the back and trying to push the ball forward, a lot of times those were going in Murray's direction. And other times it was Lexi Rodriguez that was going after those. But they did a good job at that, and I really like how Miami did this because it gave Nebraska a chance to get ready for Wisconsin when they do, if and when they eventually see them, because Wisconsin, especially Sarah Franken, loves to do that. Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed watching Miami play. Not only did they had a lot of really good plays, but I also enjoyed watching their energy throughout. Like, they had a good fire, and, like, they're just fun to watch. So.
They're probably going to be an issue on the ACC going forward. And this isn't even a team that finished at the top of the conference. I think of the 18 teams in the ACC, yeah, get that right, 18-team ACC. That's insane. But in the 18-team ACC, I think they finished 7th or 8th. They were towards, like, the middle of the pack, but they were one of the last ACC teams in terms of conference standings. I believe it was just NC State below them. But I think they're going to be a big issue going forward. I don't know if they're going to be able to compete with the likes of Pitt, Stanford, and Louisville, but I think that they're going to give a run for the money of the Florida States and the Georgia Techs.
Yeah, 100%. They went out there and played. I feel like when you go into a game that you're supposed to lose, knowing you can still upset, I feel like that could weigh a lot on you, but they went out there and it looked like they were just enjoying playing, and I feel like that's when those upsets would happen, is when you're just not thinking too much about it. So kudos to them.
Kudos indeed. So let's go to this second weekend that's going to be at the Devaney Center. There's a lot of stakes on the line, and Dayton is one of those lower mid-major teams, and It's hard to put Dayton in that category just because of how well their athletics programs are, except they're in the A10, which is not a G5 conference. So it is kind of mid-major. But Dayton really surprised a lot of people this year, and it looks like that they were on pace to be a top 16 national seed. They started to fade out towards the end of the season, and now here they are coming in and upsetting Baylor in 5 sets on their home court. I think that there's going to be a lot for them to go up against in this Friday night clash in Lincoln. I mean, with all due respect to Dayton, I'm just not sure if they're going to be prepared for what they're walking into.
Yeah, I think they had a really good game against Baylor, but I feel like Nebraska at Devaney is just a completely different beast.
And I think that's something that we're going to have to really pay attention to is while I don't think that Nebraska's going to like run the Flyers out of the gym, I don't think that's going to be the case.
Not going to be 25-3.
No, that will not happen. But I think that at some point Dayton might crumble under the pressure. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not a team that well, yes, it's a feel-good story. This is not a team that we traditionally see make it to the second weekend of the tournament.
Yeah, no, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they go up against hits like Harper Murray's or Andy Jackson's where they just plow into those blockers.
Well, what's something that you think that Nebraska is really going to have to do well to potentially set up another date with Wisconsin?
I think trying to stay in system as much as possible, because I think when teams can knock Nebraska out of system and kind of get them wandering all over the floor, I think sometimes Nebraska struggles getting back into it and getting those balls. Yeah,
I think the same. They do a good job at being able to bounce back out of system once they get the free balls over and attempting to reset, but I'm not too sure if that's going to be a huge thing that they worry about just because of how well they stay in system. Mm-hmm. So the potential rematch with Wisconsin, part 3. Yeah. I said last week that if it got to that point, that I would think Wisconsin would win that game.
Do you still think that?
So I'm going to add some more context to why I think that, because I still think that just knowing kind of how some of these non-contact sports work, and even like football too, but just how that type of deal works in the first place. It is incredibly difficult to beat a team 3 times, especially when it comes on your own floor.
Yeah.
By no means, even if Nebraska wins this game, by no means is this going to be a sweep. If it is a sweep, I will be stunned if this is a sweep. I have all the confidence in the world that Nebraska can beat Wisconsin. However, I think that with the beatdowns that Wisconsin's taken to Nebraska, losing 6 straight sets, something that hasn't happened since I even knew volleyball was a thing. And like I don't even know when that was, but that's my point. Like, it doesn't even come up in recent memory the last time that happened. Wisconsin's got a chip on their shoulder. This is, especially for Sarah Franklin, this is her last season. Devin Robinson's really trying to go out on top too. Like, Carter Booth wants to go out on top. Like, all of these different seniors that have been the epitome of, I don't even know if that's the right word, but the pinnacle, that's what I wanted to use. The pinnacle of Wisconsin volleyball for so long. Like, they're dying for this.
Yeah. I have to agree. I think it's so hard to beat a team twice in one season, let alone 3 times, and with stakes this high. I don't know. Like you said, I think Nebraska 1,000% could beat Wisconsin and has the capability to do so. I don't know if it happens.
Yeah, that's where I think this is going to be probably one of the toughest matches they play all season. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if I'd put Penn State in that same category because it seemed like they are outmatched from the start. The fact that this is not going to be in Madison helps Nebraska a ton.
Yeah.
We know that they are road warriors, but they haven't lost at home in over 2 years. So that's going to go a long way. But I just knowing how some of these very competitive sports are, I know that Nebraska is going to get run through the ringer. And it wouldn't shock me if Wisconsin won this game. I really think that this is a toss-up with just how competitive these two teams are and how closely knit they are to each other, that this really is going to come down to who makes less mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like what we've talked about all season with the serving errors, like you're giving up free points when those happen, so keeping those to a minimum. And
the fortunate thing for Nebraska is that the service errors really haven't been a huge issue, especially in the second half of the season. I mean, at least in most of the games I've gotten to watch, it doesn't feel like there's an absurd amount of service errors going on. I mean, yeah, maybe there's some errant serves here and there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really feel like that. It's just like, wow, this has been really bad.
Yeah, no. But then, yeah, keeping those wide and long shots in, all of those sort of things.
Yeah, they've cleaned. You could tell they've cleaned a lot up. And that's something, too, that I think Wisconsin's been working on, too, because that was an issue for Wisconsin both times they played Nebraska, especially, was the service errors. Something I'm going to be interested to see in this game is how well Nebraska holds down the front. Didn't even mention Anna Smrek either when I was rattling off Wisconsin players. Just how they keep track of that height. Because that is a ridiculously tall team.
Yeah.
Smrek is 6'9". I think it's either Robinson or Booth is 6'7". Sarah Franklin is 6'4". Like, Nebraska's tall, but they're not that tall.
Yeah. The only thing that gives me confidence is that we've seen that Nebraska can go up against those tall hitters and like block a lot of those shots.
I think that battle up front is really going to be what sets this apart.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think there's any hope for Texas A&M on Friday? Is part 3 set in stone, or do the Aggies actually have a chance to have one of the biggest upsets in recent memory?
I think there is a chance. I think it's very likely that Nebraska and Wisconsin play for a third time, but I wouldn't count Texas A&M out completely, because I feel like that's when you start counting teams like that out, that's when those losses come.
I think it's really going to come down in that game to who starts out better. Mm-hmm. What happens in the first 15 points.
Yeah.
And who looks more comfortable.
It's all going to be about getting out ahead.
Okay. Coming out of the Lincoln Regional. And let's even go big picture here. Which 4 teams are going to Louisville?
I don't know. I don't know.
If you had to give it a thought, what would it be? Because I can give you mine. Who I think it'll be.
Okay.
I'll go first. I do think that Nebraska's going to pull it out. I think coming out of State College, I think it's going to be Creighton.
Really?
I think it's going to be Creighton. I really do. And then I think it'll be Pitt. Mm-hmm. And then picking the unlikely one here, Louisville doesn't get to have the home court in the Final Four, and Stanford's going to go.
Really? Interesting.
So that's who I'm going with. I'm going with Pitt, Nebraska, Stanford, and Creighton as my Final Four.
Okay. I would say Nebraska and Stanford.
So you're also picking against Louisville. Interesting.
But I'm going to say Texas. I think Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Texas and then Pitt. I don't think you can't not put Pitt in there.
We're going to have some fun games this weekend. For those that are going to be going to the game, just remember that the Texas A&M Wisconsin game starts at 6 o'clock local time. Nebraska Dayton will start about a half hour after that, so make sure that you're keeping an eye on the game before. Emma, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, time to transition. Football's coming next. Welcome back. There's a new face in the chair. It's Ben Drozd.
I'm back.
Ben's back. He went on a European vacation.
That is not true.
And saw the hills of Italy and went swimming with the fish in the Mediterranean Sea. And ate a lot of pizza.
I can count on my two hands how many times I've left the state.
How many
definitely,
times?
probably like 7.
Well, that's 2 hands, not 1 hand.
I said on my 2 hands.
Oh. Well, we're
I don't leave the state. Come on, Danny.
That's embarrassing.
I have not left the country either. So
That's also embarrassing.
it's not embarrassing.
He needs to get out and touch some grass.
I mean, part of it is, you're just busy. You don't have time to travel. And I also don't like to travel. I would rather just have a day. I'd rather just have 24 hours of just not being able to leave my apartment than going out and going to do something.
Let the record show that Ben Drozd is a homebody.
Okay. I'm not going to deny.
All right, then. Well, here's something that you can't deny. Nebraska
What?
football's in a bowl game.
Yes, they are in a bowl game, and it is not one that Husker fans were hoping for, but it is a bowl game nonetheless.
But it was
Pinstripe.
the inevitable bowl game.
Going to New York, and I don't think New York is the problem, it's the weather. Well, actually, New York is part of the problem with travel and stuff, but we can get into that. Nebraska on December 28th, I believe, going to New York for the Pinstripe Bowl to face Boston College, which, honestly, I like the matchup.
Matchup should be good.
Yeah, New York was definitely not the top choice for fans.
Why was it not the top choice, Ben?
Well, I mean, what's this for media? It's an open air press box.
It's a baseball stadium.
And it's going to be December 28th, so it'll probably be pretty cold. I'm not going, so
I'm also not going.
I don't have to worry about that. But I know people that are going to be going to that, so I wish them the best of luck, and I hope they bring a space heater. But for fans, I mean, travel costs to New York. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at some of the costs, but like to be able to travel to New York, it's a lot of money. It's going to be really hard for Husker fans to get over there.
I know that there's, like, I saw something from Sean Callahan that says that they're going to be offering, like, chartered planes and they're going to be putting hotels together.
We'll see.
Like, there will be things thrown together.
If somebody wants to go, they can definitely go, but it's not going to be the most convenient.
No, it definitely isn't. It's not the same as going to, like, the ReliaQuest Bowl or even going to, I don't know, even like
Music City.
or even Detroit or something like that. Which they picked Pittsburgh this year, which is kind of an interesting one. I think they just ran out of Big Ten teams. So there's that. But what are before we go into some of the good things about this, let's start with things that aren't so good. What are some of your pushbacks of Nebraska going to the Pinstripe Bowl and just some things that are like kind of irking you the wrong way?
I mean, nothing's irking me. I mean, this is what you only got 6 wins. This is what you get. I mean, if Nebraska would have beat Iowa, they'd probably be going to Tampa right now. I don't think they would have gone Music City. I mean, maybe. I'm guessing they would have went to Tampa if they would have beat Iowa.
So do you think though that I think that's I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that would have been contingent on Ohio State beating Michigan.
True. I mean, they would have they would have went to either Music City or Tampa, and I think almost everyone can agree that both of those bowl games are better than than Pinstripe. Nothing against Pinstripe, but I mean, if you have a choice of going to Nashville or Tampa versus New York in late December, you're probably going to choose Nashville or Florida. I mean,
yeah,
just to be honest. And then also the opponent. I mean, it's going to be a better opponent if you get to probably one of those bowl games too. It's going to be a higher. And if Nebraska would have beat Iowa, they probably would have went to Nashville or Tampa, and they would have probably gotten a little bit better of an opponent. I mean, there was a lot of predictions saying that Nebraska could have went to the Music City Bowl and faced LSU. I mean, that would have been a huge game. Would they have won it? Probably not, but that still would have been a big-time game for Matt Rule to, compete with a really good SEC team. Like, that would be, especially if they can even just keep the game close or even win. I mean, I feel like a lot of Husker fans would be happy about that. Now you're playing Boston College. Your team is 6-6, and if you lose, you're going to finish the season 6-7, and that's not going to leave the right taste on Husker fans' mouths because 6-7. I mean, yes, you made it to your bowl game, something you haven't done in 8 years, but 6-7 is still a disappointing year. I mean, no matter how you slice it, that's still a disappointing year in my opinion.
Is 7-6 a disappointing season?
7-6. So that would mean if they beat Boston College.
Yep.
I would still. I mean, it wouldn't be as disappointing. I mean, I think it's still a disappointing season no matter how you look at it. I mean, you had a chance to go to Nashville or Tampa, beat Wisconsin and Iowa. Or, I mean, you honestly should have gotten Nebraska could have easily gotten 8 or 9 wins. So I just think from that lens, it's still kind of a disappointing year, but it would hurt. It would take some of the sting off if they do beat Boston College, because that'd be a nice win, to go to New York, beat Boston College. That's a team that's going to be coming wanting to play. Like, there's some teams that just aren't interested in these bowl games. I think Boston College is going to be very interested in this bowl game, which is good for Nebraska. You want a good game.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an under-the-radar matchup when you think of the grand scheme of bowl games, like especially for the non-CFP games, which we'll get into because we should get into it. But like even some of the higher tier bowl games like Music City or even the Holiday Bowl, the ReliaQuest. Like the ReliaQuest is doing a rematch of the national semifinal last year. It's Bama Michigan. Like that should be a really good game, even though there's Bama's 9-3 and Michigan's 7-5. Should still be a solid game.
Alabama will probably win.
Alabama will probably
Easy.
run the doors off of Michigan. That's not just.
I mean, Michigan's defense is good.
They should hold up. But anyway, with all that aside, there are some higher tier bowl games, but like Boston College was one of those sleeper teams to like actually make a potential run in the ACC and finish in maybe the top 4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean, they got that. What was seen at the time as that big win over Florida State at the beginning of the year. Florida State didn't amount to anything, and then Boston College kind of just dipped down a little bit. They did get to their bowl game, though, so I think it'll be an interesting matchup. I haven't really done any research yet on Boston College because that game's still like 2 weeks away, over 2 weeks away.
After Christmas.
Yeah, so I haven't really looked at that too much, but I know Boston College their quarterback that got benched entered the transfer portal. That's not going to have any effect on the game, but still, I think it'll be a good game, and that's one good way to look at it. But I think if you're a Husker fan, I think the disappointing thing is just what could have been. There's just so many what ifs with this season. If Nebraska would have pulled out a win against Ohio State, if Nebraska would have beaten either USC or UCLA, if Nebraska could have held on to their 10-point lead they had against Iowa at halftime. I mean, there's just so many what ifs. Even the Illinois game, if John Holm makes that field goal, they beat Illinois. They're still ranked then, and they have a lot more momentum as they go down the stretch and try to face Indiana, Ohio State, USC, and UCLA. I mean, there's so many what ifs with this season. This season could have went completely different if just like a few things would have been different. And you also, this is a completely sidetrack, but they got Holgorsen back for 2 more years. Imagine, a lot of Husker fans want to imagine what would have been like if Holgorsen would have been the OC the entire season. How many more wins did Nebraska have? Would they have the same amount of wins? It's interesting. But yeah, this is just a season of what ifs. And if they lose to Boston College, I think it's for sure a disappointing season. If they do beat Boston College, you finish the season 6-7. That's not bad. But
7-6.
7-6. My bad. You finish the season 7-6. That's not bad, but
basically a win and a half improvement from last year.
The way everything's set up this year, there was a lot of expectations to do a little bit better, and there's always going to be expectations at Nebraska, and there's always going to be high expectations. But I feel like with the schedule, the way everything lined up, this was the season to do it. Years past, I didn't really see the expectations. Like there was people putting expectations on Matt Rhule to make a bowl game first year. It's just like, he's probably not going to make a bowl game first year. Matt Rhule doesn't really usually have a lot of success first year just because of the way he goes about building a program. He builds him from the ground up. He's not like Signetti, who comes in and brings all these transfer portal guys that has a very veteran team. He built from the ground up. So, I don't know. I think it'll be a good matchup, though.
Should be a good matchup. So, yeah, that game's on December 28th. It's going to be played at Yankee Stadium. Should have some good semantics. Yankee Stadium, one of those places that you don't really think of should be hosting a bowl game anyway.
Probably shouldn't be.
Right. There used to be 3 baseball stadiums that held bowl games. There's the Cheez-It Bowl in Phoenix.
That'd be a fun bowl to go to.
That would be a fun game. They play that at Chase Field, where the Arizona Diamondbacks are. And then they used to play the Holiday Bowl at Petco Park in San Diego, where the Padres play, but they moved that game to where San Diego State plays at Snapdragon Stadium. But still some rumble. I still want to see a bowl game played in the friendly confines of Wrigley Field. But you know what? We get the Winter Classic this year, so that's kind of all I care about. But anyways, there's a lot of other today actually December 9th is the first like legal day of transfers.
Yep.
So there's been a lot going on with Nebraska. First of all, Emmett Johnson went into the transfer portal, then decided he's going to come back to Nebraska. So there's that.
Well, he couldn't officially enter the transfer portal until today, but it was said that he was going to enter the transfer portal, and then he made a statement yesterday saying he was not going to. So it's kind of like he didn't really enter
He
it,
didn't really do much.
but kind of changed his mind. And I know a lot of Husker fans are happy about it. He really came on at the end of the season, had a really good game against Wisconsin. I mean, the Wisconsin game was the best game he's ever had here in Nebraska, in college. He had a really good game against Wisconsin. I mean, the Iowa game he was okay. But the USC game he was also okay. But that Wisconsin game just shows potential he has with Holgorsen in this offense. But this still means, aside from this, Nebraska's still probably going to bring in a transfer portal guy that I think could compete for that starting running back job. I think. I don't think this is Emmett Johnson's back, Nebraska's final running back. I mean, before the Wisconsin game, everyone was saying that this backfield was below average. And even after the Wisconsin game, I still feel like this is a pretty average backfield. They don't really have a game changer in the backfield. Now, I think Emmett Johnson's more of a game changer than Dowdell. Dowdell kind of just a short yardage guy. But, even if Emmett Johnson would have left, I really like Emmett Johnson. He's awesome when you listen to him at the podium. He's a good person. But I'm saying he's not the production they were getting from him was not irreplaceable, if you know what I mean. If he would have left, entered the transfer portal, I think Nebraska could have found his replacement pretty easily, I think.
I'd agree. I wanted to get your thoughts, too, before we go to this recent news about a potential DC find.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get your opinions and your feelings on...
What about your feelings, Danny?
They don't matter. Your opinions and your feelings on the coaching exodus to Florida State, and then a bunch of a lot of defensive players entering the transfer portal.
I mean, the defense, it's not going to look completely different. I think. If I was a betting person, I say this on every show. If I was a betting person, we don't know that.
We know you're bad.
We don't know that, Danny.
We know you're bad.
But if I was a betting person, I think John Butler is the clear favorite to become the DC, and I think this bowl game is kind of his
like an audition.
Yeah, I would say it's like an audition for him, because I feel like Matt Rule usually likes to go with guys that he's comfortable with, guys that he's worked with for a while. Usually he likes to bring him in. Like Holgorsen, he brought him in as an analyst for a week before he gave him OC role. Because I feel like Rule usually wants to see them in-house to see how they work with the team, how they work with the players, what he thinks they could do. I find it really hard for him to bring. I find the idea of him bringing in somebody that's never coached with Matt Rule, has no experience with him, and he just brings him in as a DC. Like, he's gonna have some kind of connection to Rule. And I think John Butler, the reason he came here in the first place, he left Buffalo because he wanted to get a DC job. And right now, the door is wide open for him to get this DC job. And I think he came here in the first place knowing that Tony White was probably going to leave next season. Now, this season didn't go the way people wanted to. But, last season, he had all these head coaching rumors and saying he could have been a head coach. Now, this year, he moves laterally, and he's still a DC. I don't consider going to Florida State a lateral move. But either way, he goes to Florida State, and he's still the defensive coordinator. But still, he was expected to leave after the season anyways, heading into the season, right?
Would you have expected, because this is where I feel like there's just some things that aren't being said here. I think one thing that came out is that he wanted to be closer to home, which that I can understand. But I was expecting if Tony White was going to leave to take another job, it was going to be head coach Tony White and not another defensive coordinator position.
I mean, sometimes I don't ever really want to speculate on why a coach chose to do what they do. I think coaching is a very hard profession, and if they want to make a change, I'm not going to criticize them for going and making a change. And a lot of and this is another thing we can dive into, and might irk some Husker fans with this discussion, but I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying that this is a lateral move for Tony White, saying that Florida's going from the DC at Nebraska to DC at Florida State is a downgrade, is a lateral move, if not a downgrade. And I don't see it like that. I don't think he's getting paid. I don't know has the details of his contract been released yet?
Mm-mm.
I don't think so. So if I was to guess, I don't think he's going to be getting paid much more than he was getting paid here. I don't think he went there for the money. I think he went there, like you said, I think he has some family there in Florida. And also just a new opportunity. And when going from a recruiting side, I think recruiting, if you're a team in Florida, recruiting I think is a lot easier than recruiting here in Nebraska. I mean, why do you think Scott Frost went back to UCF? Because he's in Florida. I mean, Florida, it's a lot easier to get someone to go to sunny Florida than someone to go to Nebraska where it's 100 degrees in the summer and can be -10 in the winter. I mean, it's just harder. And I mean, the reason Nebraska was so good back in the 80s, 90s is because they were keeping talent in-house. But even that for Nebraska is starting to become hard, letting people. Nebraska has a lot of talent in the state, but a lot of them leave. But for Florida, there's also a lot of talent in Florida, and they do a better job of keeping their talent in the state. And I just think recruiting capability there in Florida State is probably a lot better than here in Nebraska. And also, I mean, Florida State, don't forget, Florida State literally last year was on the brink of making the college football playoffs with it being just 4 teams. Now, I get they went 2-10 this year, but when's the last time Nebraska been on the brink of making the college football playoffs? Or
Never.
Anything of that. Not never.
I'm talking about the college football playoff.
Well, true. I'm saying, like, that close to contention is what I mean.
I mean,
like, it's been probably since the
What was it?
2009 when Nebraska played Texas in the Big 12 championship.
yeah, for a chance at BCS, but
I mean, it's still, like, that's probably the closest Nebraska was, like, maybe.
yeah.
But, I mean, so Nebraska has a long ways to go. Yes, Nebraska's in a better conference. The Big Ten's better than the ACC. But still, I mean, I don't really think conference. I think as long as you're in the Power 4, conference really doesn't matter. Even if you're not in the Power 4. I mean, look at Boise. I mean, look at SMU. They went to the ACC. They're in. Clemson, they're in the ACC. They went in. I mean, it's not like teams that aren't in the Big Ten and SEC can't make the college football playoffs. Maybe it's even easier because I feel like the committee's kind of showing that strength of schedule. Yes, it does factor in, but it's not as big of a deal as if you lost 3 games in the SEC or Big Ten. You're probably out. I mean, it's just really hard to put those teams in. So I think Florida State, honestly, has a better chance to compete in the near future than Nebraska. I mean, if we're just being real. So that's why I don't feel like this is a lateral move or a downgrade for Tony White. I know I went on a long soliloquy there, but I wrapped it up.
You do like to ramble.
I wrapped it up, Danny.
Speaking of rambling,
do you agree, though?
I do agree. No,
Okay.
I am with you. So let's quickly do a little convo on the college football playoff.
Okay.
I think that this deserves a little oxygen. Obviously the huge debate was it SMU or Alabama? It's never going to be Alabama, people. Like, let's get that real.
There was a chance.
There was not a chance.
If SMU would have lost by like 14 or 17 to Clemson, they're probably not in. But because it was a 3-point game and SMU had a chance to win that game, I think that's why they're in. I really feel like if they would have gotten the brakes taken off of them by Clemson, they're probably not in right now. I don't think they would have put them in. But
well, now that that's settled, I'm glad.
I mean, I don't. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I think that's a good reasoning. So let's look at some of these games. So let's look at the first round first. There's a lot of interesting ones here. We have Clemson, Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Indiana, Notre Dame, and then we have Penn State, SMU.
That was off the dome. Good job, Danny.
Thank you. Wasn't in total order, but we got there. Which of those 4 games is really speaking to you?
I mean, Right now, there's no game that's specifically speaking out to me. I think just the whole debate of the seeding problem in
Okay.
the college football playoffs is a lot more.
Let's go
Just
there.
that whole
Let's go there.
discussion is very intriguing to me because a lot of people are saying that Oregon, who won the Big Ten championship, beat Penn State, number 1 seed, has a harder path to the college football playoffs than Penn State does, who lost the game and they're the 6th seed. Because Penn State plays
They'll play SMU, and if they
SMU,
win, they play Boise.
Both teams that Penn State can probably win. I think Penn State would be
should
favored.
win.
They'd be favored in probably both of those games. I think the whole problem is I just find that the seeding is very weird. Like, why does Boise and Arizona State get a bye? That just doesn't. Let me go for 1 minute.
Go ahead.
Those two teams.
I'll give you a reason why.
Those two teams. I know why.
Okay,
But it's
why?
still not a great reason, in my opinion. But still, those two teams get a bye. The whole reason why seeding works so well is because if you're the 1 seed and you're playing the 12, or let's just say there's like NBA, 1 through 8. If you're the 1 seed, you're playing the 8 seed. And the 8 seed is supposed to be the worst team out of all 8 of those teams. And the 1 seed is supposed to be the best. So it's supposed to balance each other out where the best team, the worst team play each other. The second best team and the second worst team play each other, But when you're seeding it and the third seed and the 4th seed are not as good as the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th seeds, or even 9th, that just messes it all up for where getting the number 1 seed might not even be better, even though you got that week 1 bye. That's probably not even better than getting the 5th or 6th seed where you're playing an easier opponent.
I think that this year was a trial run for
Definitely.
This was absolutely a trial run. I'll propose something to you, what I think they should do going forward.
Okay, Danny. I'm listening.
I think that the way that the tournament is seeded, because it is a tournament,
It is, yes.
it should be seeded in the way that, like, any other NCAA tournament is seeded. Okay? So you have... Now, I'm not saying that, like, Arizona State, Clemson, Boise should not be in, because, yes, they should be. But the way that I think they should do it is you have your 12 teams. You seed them 1 through 12. Your 5 conference champions get in. That's what it should be. It should not be guaranteed a bye. It should be you get into the dance.
Yes.
Now, your draw might not be great. Like, for Clemson, who was the 17 in the rankings, they would be facing, I think, oh, God, I can't even remember. They'd be facing Notre Dame, I think. They would be playing Notre Dame because they were the 5 in the rankings. So it would be Clemson, Notre Dame. Now, that would be a good game. Clemson, Notre Dame makes a lot more sense than Clemson, Texas does. That game will probably be a blowout for Texas.
I mean,
But hold on.
Yeah.
Don't mean to cut you off. But
No,
that's how it should have been in the first place.
yes.
I don't think that it should be diminished the meaning of the conference championships because
No.
it shouldn't. Like, those are important
They're
games.
still in.
They're still in. It should never have said you get a bye if you win your conference. I'll propose this to you. Let's imagine that Iowa State, Arizona State, Clemson, and SMU were all ranked lower than they were going into conference championship weekend. Let's assume the results were the same, but their rankings were lower. So you're telling me that Arizona State, let's say they're the 20th best team in the country going into the Big 12 championship, and they only moved up 3 spots. Clemson was the 23rd best team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
They move up 3 spots. So you're telling me that the 18th best team in the country should be the number 4 seed in the bracket?
Danny, we have the same argument right now.
No, I'm just like trying to simplify this.
Yes.
For people that are thinking that this is a good idea. Because, yes, it is a good idea, but there's still flaws that need to be worked out.
Yeah, it wouldn't diminish the conference championships at all.
No, it shouldn't.
Especially if you're in the ACC or Big 12. SEC, Big 10, we can have a different discussion with will these tournaments losing in the SEC tournament, would that hurt you? Like, let's say Georgia would have lost to Texas, like they would have got blown out by 30. Do they not make it then?
Well, they were number 5 going in.
Well,
right?
I know, but let's say they would have been like number 8 or something, and they get
then
get
I
blown
think
out by 30.
They probably should drop out.
So then they get punished by making it to the SEC championship. Like this part, I don't want to go there though. I want to go. Yeah, this would not hurt the meaning of the ACC championship or Big 12 championship because there's probably only going to be one team, at most two teams from those conferences to make the playoffs. Just because those conferences aren't as good, especially the Big 12 this year. I mean,
oh yeah,
the Big 12 just was a mess this year, but because they have to crown a winner, somebody has to win that conference. They get a bye. You know what I mean? Like that just doesn't. You can't tell me that Arizona State or Boise State deserve a bye more than some of these other teams.
I would say that you could make an argument if we were going to say that conference champions had to get a bye, you could make an argument for Boise State. I think you could. I don't think it'd have a lot of stone underneath it. But I think you could make an argument.
I think the fourth seed in the playoffs needs to be the fourth best team in the playoffs.
Oh, I'm with you.
Now it's not always going to be it's not always going to be ranked it's a ranking by people. Sometimes the fifth seed could beat the fourth seed, and maybe the fifth seed is better than the fourth seed. But it's still not going to be like it is right now, where the fourth seed is probably the second worst team in the college football playoff, and the third seed is maybe the third worst team. You know what I mean? Like just it makes it so Penn State, who's the sixth seed, is seen as having an easy road in the college football playoffs until they would play. I'd have to look at
for Penn State.
Yeah, for Penn State.
They'd play Boise, and then they would play. Assuming everything was chalk, it would be Penn State, Georgia. Which
that'd be a tough game, but still, I mean, their first two opponents are not seen as
not at the same caliber.
Yeah. So I mean, I think SMU and Boise, I mean, they've played great this year. I mean, I don't want to put anything against them, but I don't think there's any. I don't know how many people would pick them to win in a game against Penn State. I just think Penn State's just a better team.
Yep.
I mean, they just are. So I'm happy that teams like Boise State and SMU are able to get in. It's really fun when teams like that are able to get in, and Arizona State.
And Indiana.
Yeah, and I mean, that is why the college football playoffs this year is just going to be so awesome. But because the seeding is just a little wonky, you have Clemson, Texas, and it's just not going to be that fun of a game. It could be a fun game, but likelihood is it's probably not going to be a fun game. And just the seeding's kind of ruined it, in my opinion. I mean, it's going to get fixed. They're going to expand the college football playoffs even more, probably.
I hope not.
It's probably going to go, if I was to guess, I bet it's probably going to go to 18 next.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, it's all about money. So the more teams you can get in there, the more money you're going to get, more revenue, all that. So
just have a 1,000 team playoff at this rate. What are we doing?
It's all going to, I mean, it's just going to keep expanding. There's going to be more and more teams. It's going to get more and more complicated, and they just got to figure out a system. And right now, there is a system, but the system doesn't really make sense.
Yes. Okay, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts on CFP?
College football playoff, or who's your team that you're picking to go all the way?
Okay, do you want I'll give you my underdog, and I'll give you the team that I think is going to win it.
Okay, sure.
Okay. The team that I think is going to win is Georgia. Okay. Even with the backup, I just think Georgia's too good.
Okay.
My underdog team that I think is going to surprise people.
Let me guess.
Who do you think it's going to be?
I thought you were going to say Notre Dame.
No, I'm not going to. I was going to stay away from Notre Dame for obvious reasons.
Okay.
Arizona State.
No.
I think Arizona State's going to surprise some people.
They could surprise some people.
Arizona State's going to surprise some people.
They could maybe win one round.
If they make it to the quarterfinals or make it to the semifinals, big deal.
Yeah, no, that would be a big deal.
Big deal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Penn State has a chance to make a run just because of who they're facing. If I was to choose who I'd want to win, I mean, come on, I want to see Boise go all the way. Do you know how fun that'd be? Genty just running over every team, carrying the team on his back to go all the way.
I'd also love to see Oregon make it to the national championship game just so I get more time with the Duck. I have really fallen into Oregon Duck lore lately.
Danny.
I'm going to go grab this silly string and go start spraying it on Gus over there.
I want to say this. The one team that I'm not picking at all is Ohio State. Because if you've looked at their road, they have a really tough road. Ohio State has the talent, but they're going to have to...
Yeah, that's going to be...
They're going to have to get stuff. But, I mean, they could do it because their only team that they ever lose to is Michigan.
That is true.
And Michigan is not in these college football playoffs, so you
Who'da
don't even have to worry about Michigan right now.
Who'd have thought?
I mean, Oregon's in it. They barely lost to Oregon, but
That's true. All right. Well,
that's
thank
my
you-
thoughts.
Thank you very much.
I didn't even give my team. I don't even have a dark horse right now.
Okay.
If I was gonna, I would say a team that could surprise people. I feel like would be Penn State. I think Penn State will hang with every single team that they play, and they have a chance to win a few and turn some people's heads. I think James Franklin.
Thank you very much, young Ben. We appreciate you.
I wanted to give my opinion. I wanted to give my take.
Oh, your takes are great.
I always got to give my takes.
All right, we're going to transition to our last segment of the show. Anthony Rubek is on his way over. Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
Bye. We're back to transition for the last segment. There's a new body in the chair, and his name is one Anthony Rubek, here to deliver the Rubek Report.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, you are glimmering with excitement.
Yes, sir.
With what we're calling the new segment, the Rubek Report. We really teased that poorly, but that's just kind of what we do. So for this, Husker basketball, a lot going on, a lot of sadness, and the Zebras are not really doing all that well. But Anthony, from everything that I was reading on the Twitter sphere on Saturday morning, it was not the Zebras' fault.
Yeah.
At least most of it wasn't.
Yeah, the Huskers just got absolutely dominated by Michigan State, 89-52. It was a really bad first half. Nebraska was only down 10 going into the locker room, but then the second half only scored 21 points to Michigan State's 48. It was just all Spartans from start to finish, and yeah, just a flat-out uninspired effort from Nebraska.
Uninspired is a good way to put it, because it just kind of looked like they didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Does that feel off base?
Nah, that was exactly how they looked. I mean, it really reminded me of some of the early road games last year with Nebraska, where whether it was Minnesota or Rutgers, it was just
Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin. It was just some games
holy
where
cow.
for whatever reason on the road, they really just failed to show up to these type of games. And yeah, this was just, you can tell Michigan State really bought in and studied Nebraska's game plan going into their offense these past couple games, and Nebraska just had no response.
So I remember after the Creighton upset that Nebraska had in Omaha, it seemed like the motivations of fans were starting to ride high. Do you feel like this was a reality check, or does it seem more that the Creighton game was an aberration?
I don't know. I think there was a lot of reason to be high on Nebraska following that Creighton game, and the Huskers really backed that up their next two non-conference games. While, yes, they were against South Dakota and North Florida, they still put up 96 points and 103 points. So it was really their defense that was the show against Creighton, whereas these next couple games, their offense showed that they can also score at an elite rate, which really led people to believe that they can really do some damage in the Big Ten this year. However, against Michigan State, both lacked good offense and defense throughout the game. However, I do think that it's first Big Ten game of the season, first really true road test. I know Creighton fans, there was a lot of red at CHI Health Center there, so I think it will definitely be more telling this next game against Indiana at home.
What do you think was really the breakdown in that game? What was causing those troubles that really allowed Michigan State to just kind of make the game a laugher?
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska really just could not finish down low. And, there's a problem. They couldn't shoot well from the three-point line, just 4 of 22. But usually, especially early on in the season, they were able to make up for that in the paint, getting buckets there. But Juwan Gary, just 4 of 11. Bryce Williams, 3 of 7. I mean, Braxton Mia was a non-factor as well. Only played 11 minutes, only shot the ball once. So
yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because Braxton Mia, it seemed like coming in, he was going to be like one of these pieces that they were really going to need to start to come up and really start to fill the role of Rink Mast and even Josiah Alec a little bit. I think the role of Josiah Alec is starting to get filled by Berke Buchenschel. Does that feel like a fair assessment?
yeah, I think so. I think Burke and then Andrew Morgan too, who he was probably Nebraska's
one I
best
didn't think
player.
of.
14 points off the bench, but Mia, he just can't stay on the court. Despite
Yeah,
starting,
what do you think's going on there?
just fouls. He finished with 4 personal fouls against Michigan State. A lot of them came early that took him out of the game. And in these games, you only get 5 fouls. So a lot of these times, especially early in the second half, if he picks up the third or fourth, then that just limits him throughout. And it also limits his play style. He can't play as physical as he needs to play when he's picking up all these early fouls. So
Is there a reason for concern for Braxton Mia?
I think there is. I think, he showed what he can bring on the defensive end against Creighton, against Ryan Kalkbrenner. But even then, that was a team effort with Burke and Andrew Morgan as well, helping guard Kalkbrenner. But yeah, I mean, the foul trouble is a big problem. The 4 fouls he had, Burke had 3. That was a thing against Creighton. It was overall very little in their win, as they were able to, stop Creighton from other places as well. But I remember at the end of the first half, they had Cale Jacobson guarding Ryan Kalkbrenner because all 3 guys picked up 2 fouls in the first half, and they couldn't afford having them out there picking up one in the last minute of the first half. So they definitely need to work on that.
Were there any positives from the game on Saturday? Like even like the smallest thing. Was there anything good that Nebraska can take away from the game?
Not really. I mean, again,
Wow.
Andrew Morgan had a solid day, 14 points, 7 rebounds. But looking at everyone else for Nebraska, there's no player who had more than 3 rebounds outside of that, which is just not good at all. I mean, Connor Essegian, who had been on fire going into the game, just shot the ball twice, missed them both, finished with 1 point. And yeah, Bryce Williams, who is their leading scorer, only had 11 points, 3 of 7 shooting. So just an overall performance to forget for Nebraska.
Well, they're going to have to forget it fast because Indiana is coming to town on Friday, and the environment should be pretty good, I feel like. There's going to be a lot going on in Lincoln on Friday night, and I think that it's a chance. It could be a get-right game. I mean, Indiana traditionally has been one of the better programs in the Big Ten, and it's going to be real interesting to see how Mike Woodson's squad fits into the new look Big Ten. But what are some things you're looking for coming up on Friday?
Yeah, I think that will be a good matchup. Indiana was ranked earlier in the season, fell out of the top 25 now, but they have a lot of good players, a lot of players who were on the team last year, Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako. And yeah, this was a team that Nebraska beat 3 times last year. They beat them at home, on the road, and in the Big Ten tournament. So definitely, some games that Indiana want to have back and might carry an extra chip on their shoulder into this matchup, but it should certainly be, like you said, a get-right game for Nebraska, game to kind of get them some good momentum. Then they're going to Hawaii for a little non-conference tournament, and then ultimately go back into Big Ten play to start the year. So as the last Big Ten game for a while, this would be a pretty nice game to have.
What are some things, though, that Nebraska needs to get right? We just mentioned how this was a get-right game, but what are some of the things on the top of your mind that Nebraska really needs to do to get back on track?
Yeah, I think it starts with their offense and their shooting. I mean, they had those great 3-point outings against South Dakota and North Florida, but in their games against, high-tier opponents, quad 1, quad 2 games, they've really struggled from shooting from deep. They shot 18% from 3 this past weekend, and it just isn't just 3-point shooting. They got to focus on their scoring inside as well. They need to get more out of guys like Jawan Gary, Braxton Mia, obviously, and stuff like that. So I think the offensive side, defense also obviously has improved, letting up 89 points. While Michigan State is Michigan State, still not ideal whatsoever.
All right, let's make a quick switch over to women's basketball.
Sure.
We can run this one real quick. Blowout win for them against Minnesota on Sunday. Not really something that I really saw coming, especially when there was only one combined loss between the two teams. Minnesota came in at 10-0. Nebraska actually did move up in the latest AP rankings. They're now 24. But it was the one thing that I really noticed from that game, I did get to go to it, was Minnesota won the turnover battle by a lot. I think it was like 15-4, and they still lost by a ton.
Wow, that's usually the opposite when you talk about games like that. And really just is very interesting to see on how Nebraska was able to overcome those issues and where they were able to do their scoring from. They shot 43% from three, obviously helped them big there. They had a lot of contributors both from the starters and off the bench. And, I really like how, I don't know how big of a role she's been playing in being added to the starting lineup, but Kendall Cooley has been a nice replacement. She started the last couple games for Nebraska. Obviously, with Natalie Potts being out for the season, they've really been experimenting, putting a bunch of different players in the lineup. But right now, Cooley's been holding it down.
Yeah, and that was definitely something that I didn't really expect to start out with Kendall Coley, because a lot of times when she's out there on the floor, she just doesn't really feel like there's a lot of contributions that are happening, especially on defense. But you could kind of gotten to tell over the last couple of games that there has been some very gradual improvement, and I think that she might be staying in the lineup for a little while.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's been experienced with the program. She's been here the last 5 years, and yeah, it's just really showing me a lot of these players who have been with the program for years really step up. I mean, Callan Hake has been really good as of late. She's been getting career high after career high, stuff like that. And yeah, it's just really good seeing players fill in the void from Natalie Potts, at least on the scoring end.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like that the scoring is really taking a beating. And I think that's where Kendall Coley has really shined, is being able to step into that front court role. And it doesn't really feel like that the scoring has been there. It feels like they're still trying to dump the ball off to Markowski as much as possible, but they're taking more risks with the shooting. And I noticed that a lot with just how much the three-point shooting is going on, because this is one of the more three-point happy teams in the conference.
Yeah, and it's something that they wanted to carry in from last year. I remember I covered the season opener against Omaha, and they didn't really get many of their three-pointers to fall, but in the post-game, Alexis Markowski is like, we pride ourselves on the three-pointer, and that, once it starts falling, I think she said, like, good luck or something like that, or like, it's over. And, I mean, now that they're starting to fall, we see it, giving a Minnesota team their first loss of the season in a blowout victory.
I think this is going to be a team with – I still think that the ceiling is very high for them going forward. I was a little bullish with my prediction to think that they could be a opening weekend host. I think that's kind of out the window right now. But as long as they stay in the rankings, I think that this is really going to be a team to be reckoned with. Oh, yeah.
This is obviously the Big Ten is going to be very stacked this year.
That trip out to Los Angeles is going to be rough.
Juju Watkins and all that. But Nebraska definitely can make some noise in it. And I can see them definitely being a favorable seed in the NCAA tournament. Even with the Potts injury, I think they've done a great job handling that adversity so far, and we'll just have to see how they do going forward.
UCLA, #1 team in the country still.
Yep. Wild.
It's not South Carolina no more. Sorry, Don Staley. Well, thank you, Anthony, for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Good to catch up on some Nebrasketball. Thanks to Emma and Ben for stopping by as well. That'll wrap up today's edition of Scarlet Fever. Thanks for watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. Our app will continue to support over there. We'll see you next time.